All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Peninsula Hotel for this session today on accelerating energy efficiency financing in the Philippines. My name is Mark Lister, and I will be your MC for today. So you'll be sick of seeing me and hearing me by the end of the day, probably. I'm going to be coming around to talk to you all and catching up on your take on this topic, which is a really important one as we look at ways to speed up the energy transition, speed up the uptake of good practices, which will help us to meet greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and improve productivity at the same time. Our meeting today is hosted by the Bankers Association of the Philippines. I would like to really thank them for their support in bringing the meeting together and inviting all of you here for what should be a really interesting session. The other hosts for the meeting, very importantly, are the Energy Transition Partnership, the team for whom is over on the table to my right here. And it's really a good time to bring this discussion together. I think in the Philippines, there's a mood for change in this area. There's legislation which is being rolled out now and starting to be implemented in a way that will hopefully really lead to some impact and change. So this is an important staging point on the way, looking at how all of you as banks, and very important in this area, looking at how we can finance this transition. And much more needs to be done. So I'm looking forward to a practical, engaging session. I want to point out that it's a hybrid meeting. So we're moving back to the old way of doing things. Seems like a new way of doing things, but the old way of having all of you here. And it's great to see everybody in the room together. We've also got quite a number of participants who are coming in from overseas, from international experts, also those who couldn't make it here in person today and are going to be presenting from home. So we'll be having the technology all through the day and juggling that. It should be interesting. I'm hoping that it will go smoothly. We have our technical support team in San Francisco who are helping us today. And I'm hoping that there will be a seamless presentation of all of that. The agenda for today is available. There's a QR code on your table. We didn't want to print them out. You should be able to scan that to see the agenda for today. We have quite a range of different speakers and things happening. And so I'll take you through that today. First of all, we're going to look at what is really happening here from a range of different perspectives in the Philippines. Then we're going to look at what's been done elsewhere in the world as best practice or success from some different perspectives, speakers coming in from various places, and then give you a chance to talk. So this is really a consultation. It's not a lecture at you. It's not a presentation of many, many slides and then you go home. In the afternoon today, I will be calling on you to really give your perspective, because what we want to know is your experience. What is really happening from your point of view? What is stopping you from going further? And how can we help to break down those barriers? So it will be pretty interactive. You'll see me asking you, calling on you, so you don't have to fall asleep during the session. You'll have to be awake. The first thing is that we have a survey for you to do. And this is something you can do during the session today. You can fill it out at your leisure. Just on the screen there, you can see a QR code. So I don't know if you can scan that from your seats, or if you would like to scan it, we can also find a way to make sure you have it. If you want to scan it now, I'll also put it up again in the break, so you can take a look at that. And then around just after lunch, I'm going to look at the results and engage you on these results. What are we really seeing here? So this is something for you to do while you're listening in during the session. I'll leave it up just for one more second. So that's enough from me. Let's get started. We're starting with some welcoming remarks from our hosts. And first of all, that will be from Benjamin Castillo, who's the president of the Bankers Association of the Philippines. He's recorded a message for us by video, which we can play now to welcome you to today. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this consultative workshop. The Bankers Association of the Philippines is pleased to partner with the United Nations Office for Project Services, or UNOPS, and with the Energy Transition Partnership, or ETP, to have this discussion on efforts to accelerate energy efficiency financing in the Philippines. We are privileged to have in today's event the Department of Energy's Director for Energy Utilization Management Bureau, Mr. Patrick Aquino, and his team. This is our first collaboration with the Department of Energy, and we hope to continue with this laudable initiative. Of course, and as always, it is an honor to have Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Assistant Governor Lynn Javier. Lynn has guided us well and proactively engaged the industry on various policies and regulatory developments, particularly on environment, social and governance, sustainable finance, and more recently, specifically on climate risk-related initiatives. Through our partners in ETP, we welcome Ms. Sirpa and experts from the World Bank and Asian Development Bank, plus recognized global international companies in this field who will be providing their global insights and trends. We are also joined by our local industry partners who will generously share the Philippine experiences and perspective. I'm confident that the industry is stepping in the right direction as we have today the Development Bank of the Philippines to share their successes as well as challenges in financing these projects. We hope that this workshop will lead to more synergies and collaboration with the national government and other stakeholders. Lastly, I apologize for not being with you in person today. I have opted for this recorded message following prevailing health protocol. I wish everyone a meaningful and fruitful day. Thank you very much. Magandang umaga po.
Yes, and thank you to Managing Director Castillo for those opening remarks. Let's also hear from our other co-hosts now, very importantly, Ms. Sirpa Yavampah. She's the Executive Director, I think, of the Energy Transition Partnership, very much behind today and very much leading and instrumental in a lot of work going on at the moment to speed up the energy transition in Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So, Sirpa, please.
Thank you, Mark. That was very kind. The title is Fund Director of the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership. So thanks a lot. Ms. Lynn Javier, Assistant Governor of Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Ms. Pinky Padronia, Senior Associate Director of the Bankers Association of the Philippines. Bankers and finance professionals, development partner colleagues, friends, welcome to this financial consultation. Welcome to all of you. Mark Lister, our energy efficiency expert and chair of the Energy Efficiency Evaluation Organization. Ralph Apita, research associate of the Asia Clean Energy Partners. Mayna Barcelona from the Bankers Association of the Philippines. Welcome to all of you and thank you for organizing this event. Thank you also to the UNOPS staff that have been helping to set up the event. I don't know if any of you or all of you know what ETP is. We are the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership. We are a multi-donor trust fund that brings governments of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Canada together with philanthropic partners of Children's Investment Fund Foundation, IKEA Foundation, Sequoia Climate Fund, and other philanthropies to support bold efforts to accelerate energy transition here in the Philippines, as well as in the Southeast Asian region. Let me briefly introduce ETP team members, so that you know who we are. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. John Cotton, our Senior Program Manager. We also have Ms. Fritzi Verhel, our Philippines Country Coordinator. Hi, Fritzi. And we also are joined by our Vietnam Country Coordinator, Mr. Toan Do. So thank you, John, Fritzi, and Toan. So why does ASEAN matter in terms of energy efficiency? Well, ASEAN countries combined make a $3 trillion economy, or the 5th largest economy in the world. Thus, continuing business as usual, given this region's very rapid growth here in Southeast Asia, would end up making this region a significant emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. So the International Energy Agency outlines that energy efficiency remains the principal emissions reduction strategy. And more than 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions globally and also here are expected to come from energy efficiency savings. In short, energy transition challenge, energy efficiency is the first fuel. And IEA has snappily coined that energy not consumed is the greenest energy of them all. So ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation has set a regional target of reducing energy intensity by 36% in the region. And the Philippines has taken on board this target and committed to improving its energy intensity by 3% across the economy per annum, and to generate minimum of 10% of energy savings in electricity from all sectors in the economy by 2040. So by providing support to enabling policy environment and de-risking energy efficiency and renewables investments, extending smart grids and building awareness, we at ETP, among other development partners, support energy efficiency. And at ETP, we have taken some initial steps. We have, since the start of ETP's operations in late 2020. So we started by conducting a diagnostic to bring the knowledge on the barriers to energy efficiency to one place, to one report, to provide a transparent compendium of what really is impeding energy efficiency opportunities for all partners and parties to take advantage of. Secondly, we issued several calls for innovative proposals to kick off the market for energy efficiency investments to enable real, tangible progress to expand energy efficiency market, and for all of us to learn from such experience. And one of these calls was won by Climergy and Alexa Blaza's proposal, which is proposing a very innovative opportunity to accentuate energy efficiency investments. We'll hear from Alex and Gorby later on in the evening. Yeah, today, I mean. And today we also are launching our third step in this process, which is to conduct this detailed and in-depth consultation with you, the practitioners and finance officers in energy efficiency. Particularly, we are interested in developing a fundamental and a detailed understanding on what actions and facilities specifically would unlock energy efficiency markets here in the Philippines. We intend to use this knowledge to generate a coordinated approach to attract development partner and private sector interest and funding around these needs to unleash energy efficiency outcomes, the tangible results in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reductions through energy savings. So we hope that this coordinated approach would then in turn help us make advancement towards the targets that I mentioned earlier that Philippines has committed to. So turning quickly to the specifics, at least here in the Philippines, legislation is not seen as a key problem. So in the Philippines, we have this energy efficiency and conservation law from 3 years ago, which provides the legal underpinnings for energy efficiency. However, we really need to understand how this law can deliver its intended impact. And we need more demonstration projects to build the capacity and the awareness to really showcase the economics of energy efficiency investments. This certainly will require more of traditional funding from financial institutions like yours, ideally without the support of the corporate balance sheet. We also need to develop an understanding that embraces savings-based cash flow models and build confidence in savings-based cash flows to unlock funding for such energy efficiency projects at a reasonable cost. Standards for equipment, particularly cooling, are also at the push side of this equation, as cooling will see an exponential growth with the population and income growth. And here in the Philippines, we have been forecasted to have 6.9% growth in this year, which is fantastic given the past few years' experience. But at the same time, like China showed, by setting clear and compelling standards and enforcement of those standards, they were able to reduce more than half of the electricity in the space cooling through those standards. The role that we hope that ETP can play here is that of a catalyst to marshal resources from the international community to support energy efficiency finance under this coordinated approach that I mentioned earlier. Thus, ETP is seeking to do more in the energy efficiency front, and today's consultation is a serious and a critical step in trying to glean from your knowledge and from your experience a fundamental understanding what measures have a good chance at success. And let me now also conclude by wishing us a productive workshop. So our workshop today is really an opportunity for us to design together this coordinated program to harvest more resources for energy efficiency from public and private sources. So let's make use of this opportunity. Very final point, Mark. Given that we are so pleased to be able to celebrate this grant that we were able to award to Clemergy for the innovative concept that they made a proposal for in one of our calls, which is a real sort of real life innovative opportunity for us to all learn from. I would like to suggest that maybe just before we go for the lunch appointment, which I think is served somewhere nearby here, we would convene here for a photo shoot all together and also celebrate Clemergy's grant. So thank you all for being here. We really look forward to this consultation. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you very much, Sirpa, and for all the work that you're doing in the region on these important issues. Just a couple of housekeeping issues for today's meeting. Lunch will indeed actually be served in this room when it comes to lunchtime. As Sirpa suggested, let's get together for a moment so that we can actually commemorate the event with a photo. Also, as was said, this is a consultation. So this morning we're going into a session now, which I hope will be very interesting and everyone is going to learn something. We have some real experts for you on this question of energy efficiency financing. So it's a chance to learn about that, a chance to learn about what is really happening in the Philippines. But then we also need to hear from you this afternoon, which is what I've said earlier. We're really looking forward to your interaction. Also on housekeeping, the restrooms, if you need them, are outside to the right, and you can find them there. And in terms of fire escape evacuations, it's pretty straightforward. There's two enormous staircases in this wonderful building, which will take you straight outside. So I just wanted to clear those things. So let's move on to our first session. We have some time for this to give some more background and some more perspectives on what is really happening in the Philippines on this question. First, of energy efficiency and ambition. Second, on the experiences of those who seek finance to do these kinds of projects. And then also from the banking sector. So we have some very senior representatives and some real experts to speak to you about these things. Starting off, we have a presentation, I think a video presentation on behalf of Director Patrick Aquino from the Department of Energy, talking about the legislation, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. So I'll ask if we can start with that video now, please.
Good day, I'm Director Patrick T. Aquino of the Energy Utilization Management Bureau. Let me discuss the investment opportunities on energy efficiency and conservation, or EEC. There are multiple areas of investment in EEC here in the Philippines. Some of these areas are in government, in the energy-conserving design of buildings, in designated establishments, in energy service companies, and in energy-efficient products. Here in the Philippines, we recognize that subsequent interventions are needed to attain the objectives of the changing landscape of how we act, how we think, and how we use energy. It is clearly stated in the EEC Act that fiscal incentives play a major role in promoting investments in energy efficiency. These incentives will accelerate the capital expenditures and investments, particularly in high energy-saving technologies and high-efficiency services. On the topic of incentives, the DOE has 2 department circulars providing for the guidelines for the endorsement of EE projects to the Board of Investments for fiscal incentives. These twin issuances cover simple and complex EE projects as well as new EE projects and the expansion EE projects. The Strategic Investment Priority Plan, or SIPP, is also considered in the endorsement for fiscal incentives. In 2021, we noted that there was a total investment of 2.81 billion pesos from our designated establishments, or entities who consume at least an average of 100,000 kilowatt-hours equivalent per year. These investments yielded 312 gigawatt-hours of energy savings. Meanwhile, our 37 energy service companies, or ESCOs, have invested a total of 209 million pesos, which yielded 23.31 gigawatt-hours of reduced energy consumption. These investments from our designated establishments are from their energy efficiency projects, such as the acquisition of new equipment, conversion to efficient lighting, electrical systems improvement, equipment maintenance, process plant automation, renewable energy projects, and system rehabilitation and upgrade, among others. Meanwhile, our energy service companies, or ESCOs, implement energy efficiency projects such as the installation of PV systems, use of variable frequency drives, or VFDs for chillers, harmonic current mitigation by active harmonic filters, power factor correction by reactive power compensation, cogeneration using waste heat as a source of space cooling, and street lighting technical review, among others. These projects go hand in hand with our energy efficiency practitioners who propose, implement, and verify these energy efficiency projects. These practitioners include Certified Energy Conservation Officers, or CECO, for Type 1 designated establishments, and Certified Energy Managers, or CEM, for Type 2 designated establishments. Certified Energy Auditors, or CEA, are also included. They may be individuals or entities certified by the DOE with proven credibility and competence to conduct energy audits. The recognized training institutions, or RTIs, are only entities that are eligible to conduct prescribed trainings for these energy efficiency practitioners. You may view the full details in our DOE website. For our government sector, 2,239 or 30.1% of the total number of government entities have complied with the different Interagency Energy Efficiency and Conservation Committee, or IAEECC resolutions. These resolutions involve the conduct of energy audits, adoption of energy-efficient lighting, and the adoption of energy-efficient air conditioning, among others. Meanwhile, our guidelines on the energy-conserving design of buildings were developed to assist in reducing the energy consumption of new and existing buildings. It covers different aspects of a building's design, such as the building envelope, mechanical systems, and electrical systems. We are currently working on updating the guidelines this year, as well as harmonizing them with the latest Philippine Green Building Code and as a requirement in the issuance of building permits. This concludes our presentation on the different investment opportunities on EEC. Once again, I'm Director Patrick T. Aquino of the Energy Utilization Management Bureau. Thank you for your kind attention.
I'm not sure if we have a representative here physically to join the panel today. Do let me know if we do have anyone in the room to do that. Director Aquino has been actually called away for consultation on the EV public consultation, which is going on today. So sends his apologies, and if he's able to get away, he's intending to come along and join us this afternoon. So we don't actually have a panelist in the chair for DOE today, unfortunately. But let's hear an introduction from our next panelist in this session, and it's from Tom Dreesen. Tom is, for anyone involved in energy efficiency, well known to the industry. He's been involved for many, many years, has set up a number of energy services companies, or ESCOs, in many countries, and has been instrumental in activities in this region as well. He's been an advisor and a board member of many organizations, including the North American ESCO Association, the Alliance to Save Energy, and the Efficiency Evaluation Organization. And he's also recently done some work on the state of play in Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam on behalf of ETP. So Tom is going to present some of that work to you now and what he's found. Tom, it's great to see you. He's dialing in from Jakarta, I think. And yeah, Tom is a real expert in this area, and it's great to have him along for the meeting today. Please go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Can you see my screen okay? I shared it. Can you see it all right?
We can see you and hear you perfectly. Go ahead.
Good, good. Well, welcome to everybody. And I'm really, it's my pleasure to participate. My apologies. As Mark says, I'm down here in Jakarta working on a new technology for power generation plants, believe it or not, doing EE projects, spending a lot of time in East Java, but otherwise I would have been able to make it. Really appreciate SERPA and everybody's previous introduction to the topic of energy efficiency. And as SERPA said with ETP, they did a report, and you can see on the screen on March 3rd that I ended up spending a lot of time with a few experts in these countries to really a diagnostic analysis of the three countries, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. And I guess what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to eliminate some overlap what people have already said from the report. So I've deleted that and kind of just focused in on the new information that's in this report. And I'm not sure, perhaps SERPA or somebody else from ETP can share whether the access of this report that I'm going to present the summary of. So that briefly, the opportunity in Southeast Asia, very simply put, I've been working in these three markets. I was active for 3 years on the LSEP program with UK funded a program, that's low carbon emission program in Southeast Asia, which gave me the opportunity to be pretty familiar with these three markets. And in summary, the electric rates are very low in Indonesia and Vietnam, but very high in the Philippines, which has always been a mystery to many people with the high rates. So why the low penetration of energy efficiency? Another common thing about all the markets is that most facility owners in the three countries have not even begun to look at or consider implementing the most fundamental of EE technologies in their facilities. We found that to be the case, and huge potential for energy savings, investment, and reduced greenhouse gas emissions, which you already heard. So that's just a verification of what the opportunity is. It's huge in this market, but it's not without its barriers. Briefly, there are three major targets, or the internet or national targets in the three countries. SERPA already discussed them with the Philippines, but in Indonesia, they have very aggressive targets to decrease energy intensity by 1% per year, decrease total energy consumption by 17%, and the GDP elasticity to below 1% by 2025. And also then to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 29% on its own, with its own capacity, and then with international assistance up to 41% by 2030. And as one of the challenges in the country in Indonesia, though, is there's no real roadmap to achieve any of this. So there's a real gap in coming up with a program which is not in the report, but from a programmatic standpoint or policy standpoint, there's really no roadmap, as I said, to achieve any of these targets. It's a real gap in the marketplace. However, in the Philippines, as you know, decrease energy intensity by 3%, electricity consumption by at least 10% by 2040, and then reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 75% versus the business as usual scenario by 2030 and 2010 versus the 2010 scenario. In Vietnam, achieve energy savings of 5 to 7%. is their target there. And by 2019 to 2025 and 8 to 10% to 2030, and then reduce power loss to less than 6.5% in 2025. And Vietnam, they're in a different scenario. Many countries of Indonesia. Indonesia has excess capacity in the Java, the major island. The PLN, the state-owned utility, is only operating about 60% capacity, so they have excess capacity. Whereas in Vietnam, they don't have enough capacity, so they're doing a heavy renewable program, and also then are looking to obtain new power. That's why their power loss, that's one of their targets.
Tom, can I interrupt you for 1 second just to let you know that at this end your slides are not advancing if you're trying to move forward
they're
through your
not?
slides? No, we're still on the title page here.
Huh. Mine is. I wonder if there's a delay.
I'm not sure.
Mine's showing on my screen. I wonder what's going
Okay.
on. Maybe I'll come off the presentation mode.
We can also share them from our end if you would prefer.
Maybe you should do that, right?
Yeah, 1 minute, 1 second, sorry.
Sorry
Thank
about
you
that.
for letting. No, thank you
Go
for letting
ahead.
me know. I
Yeah.
was merrily going down my way, So let me know when you've got.
Here
Yeah,
you
go to slide 4. Yeah, slide 4.
Okay, we're back on now, and if we can advance to slide 4. Okay, I think you're on the slide about key regulation in Indonesia.
Right,
Tom?
I'm going to the previous slide. Maybe I should go back through that. The targets of the 3 countries. I think I
Okay.
went through that. You can see that. Go to the previous slide so everybody can
Okay.
just get a brief overview and see
Great.
what I
Yeah, and I
presented.
think great if you can focus remarks on the Philippines as well, just in the interest of time.
I
know
will.
you have more
No,
material
that's-
than you can go
Yeah.
through. in the time.
This is just high level on the Indonesia e-regulation.
Great. Thanks. Go
Okay,
ahead.
and yep, essentially, they only got one regulation. It was done in 2009, and it was set up to mandate industrial facilities consuming more than 6,000 TOE per year to submit energy consumption reports, conduct energy management audits, implement EE projects, identify the audits, or face government penalties. Major problem is virtually no entities reported, have never reported. And if they have, the data is not accurate in most people's opinion. So it's really been not an effective regulation, although the regulation itself is good, but there's lack of enforcement, which seems to be a common trait in many countries in Southeast Asia. So specifically to the Philippines, then going right to that, the next slide. Some of this has already been stated. Some of it would have been covered. I've seen Patrick Aquino's presentation. It was cut short and covered some of this. So I'll just briefly talk about what is the main regulation, just high level, as you know, is the EEC Act, which I consider to be groundbreaking energy EE regulation in Southeast Asia, establishing a national framework for basically the implementation of EE technologies. Mandates reporting and implementation of energy efficiency by all government agencies, local government units, and all industrial, commercial, transport establishments. Mandates EE certifications for energy managers, energy auditors, and ESCOs. Authorizes the use of new EE ESCO financing modalities by government agencies, which is a key element to opening up the governmental sector. However, there remains to be big gaps in the marketplace on how to implement those financing modalities. And then it mandates minimum energy performance standards and many others. The big challenge, of course, is DOE is solely responsible, or the main agency responsible for implementing the EEC Act, but it's under budgeted, understaffed, and hiring a lot of new people that lack EE experience and capacity. So these are the things identified in the report as far as regulatory. Vietnam, I'll spend just a brief amount of time on that for the sake of not devoting too much beyond the scope of the Philippines. But their national program, they have a VNEP 3 program, which is a major policy, has targets a 5 to 7% reduction, contains all kinds of a laundry list of all these different targets and summary of programs, contains a legal framework. But the problem is that VNEP 3 is a policy, it's not a law, and it cannot be legally enforced. So it's a big every policy still has to be, or every law, any regulation has to be initiated, and it takes years to get done. So while it's a great roadmap, it's kind of like a laundry list and very difficult to discern which is the priorities and where they're going to go with it. These are the common EE market barriers, gaps, and interventions in all three countries. The main barriers are 5 main barriers. One is that there's low EE market knowledge and low demand from energy end-use energy consumers. And the gaps are that there's no incentives or mandates to drive private sector EE demand. And that's on the private sector side predominantly. Interventions that are common that need to be done or recommended is to develop and implement and finance savings-based demonstration projects, and then develop cash incentive programs that will drive demand for the private sector. Other barriers are little to no EE in government facilities. And the reason this is such a major barrier, if you look at all countries where energy efficiency has taken off, especially ESCO sector, private sector, it's in those countries where the government programs have, or EE's been dominant or very active in the governmental sector. The government sector has taken the lead in implementing energy efficiency. It creates demand from the marketplace, creates templates, RFPs, models, and capacity, technical capacity in the marketplace. And so, in my opinion, in our opinion, that the governmental sector is key to driving energy efficiency. And the gaps, of course, is that there's government regulatory barriers. Of course, that is being addressed in the Philippines. So this relates more to Vietnam and Indonesia. And that's one of the beauties of the EEC Act, is that it does address these barriers. And the interventions are to remove the EE regulatory barriers, predominantly in Vietnam, because it is being addressed in a very slow way in Indonesia. Other barriers, little to no technical capacity to develop bankable EE projects. Huge problem globally in any developing market, but in these 3 countries, there's insufficient technical development capacity. How to develop a bankable EE project. Most of the technical knowledge is done on a very high level walkthrough type audit basis, and there's very little knowledge about what is an investment grade audit, what's required to make it bankable. The interventions are develop EE development capacity building programs, which includes not only just training, but certifications, which I'll go into a little bit more by market. Barriers, no commercially viable EE financing, that's the gap. And we believe the best interventions for that is to develop EE finance de-risking products. That's the energy savings insurance and the partial credit risk guarantee. And I know a lot of that's going to be discussed today for the Philippines, and I'm really anxious to hear what the bankers think. Other barriers, low implementation and financing capacity EE stakeholders. I mean, there's just, they don't have the ability to really implement stakeholders, any of the stakeholders. And the gaps, of course, is the limited ESCO implementation capacity in all markets. There's a good ESCO association there, but and I'm sure Alex is going to discuss some of that, but the capacity in the marketplace is very limited in actual implementation, documentation, measurement, verification of savings, and especially the investment grade audit. Interventions, establish or rebuild a robust ESCO association in terms of the implementation, because the ESCO is one of the few entities that bundles energy efficiency projects and technologies to scale up the overall investment and implementation of EE. So I'm not going to spend too much time on Indonesia. Mark, if that's all right with you, I can just go through it real highlight. Is that what you prefer? I don't want to spend too much time on.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
So
I think let's focus on the Philippines from here and wind up.
Yeah. These are the recommended. Just briefly, they've got a couple. They're all same covered up above on the previous slide, right? Those are common ones, and you can see the high level ones: savings-based demonstration projects, capacity building, and robust. So these are the ones in the Philippines. And one of the things that was clear in the report, this goes back to March, still was obvious to me and my team in doing this report, is the Philippines is very advanced compared to Indonesia and Vietnam, but because of this groundbreaking regulation, the EEC Act. But the recommended interventions are to develop, implement, and finance savings-based demonstration projects in the private sector and governmental sectors. And in particular, the governmental sector, because the LGUs are a focus and a big focus of the Act and have the least amount of technical capacity, we felt it was very good to establish a savings-based guidelines through the initial street lighting LED program or project at an LGU, because most LGUs, local government units, have street lights, and it has a scalable, It's very replicable type of a technology. So we recommended that that would be a great demonstration project that could be highly leveraged in the governmental sector. Another one is to lever capacity building, improve knowledge, employees, not only of GAs, but also DOE. Some of that's been done on the LSEP program that I've been able to participate or provide. But these other recommendations are key. One is to support, I believe that one of the big ones is to support DOE's implementation of the Act as needed to implement the EEC Act. Again, some of that capacity building has been done already through LSEP, but there's a lot more that needs to be done with establishing actual procedures for some of their reporting requirements. Leverage existing local training programs for CEMs and certified energy auditors. And the big one is to provide new existing international certification programs. CIGA, CESV, that's a certified investment grade auditors, certified in energy savings verifiers, that's measurement verification, EE project finance, and ESCO development and other TNC training and certification programs. All of these certification programs are needed to basically have a standard method of requiring individuals to demonstrate their capacity by passing an exam, taking a test that certifies they have the capacity to perform investment grade audits and perform in measurement verification of savings. Last intervention is one that we're probably going to highlight a little bit today, is that develop new EE finance de-risking products, and as was part of the summary, energy savings insurance product that would mitigate performance risk against any shortfalls in savings versus debt service. That's a big one, and one of the recommendations would be to create a USD $10 million first loss fund to share initial losses with a local insurer, which it needs to be, I think would be the way to leverage it, to have a local insurance program, insurance company. And we did some presentations under LSEP to the insurance industry, and they were quite keen on that. Another was to leverage the Phil guarantees existing PCG to reduce collateral that's required on EE loans with the government financial institutions. That's a big barrier in the marketplace. With the Development Bank and Land Bank, both of those have energy savings financing GFI programs, but their biggest barriers, they can't get the collateral. The LGUs and the other government agencies do not have the collateral that's required from the GFIs. So this would help remove a major barrier for financing projects with the governmental agencies. Other known recommendations are develop EE project and cash incentive programs. I know Director Patrick Aquino was talking about some of the incentive programs, but they're not really, in our opinion, robust enough to really move the needle and create energy efficiency demand. And last is to develop EE consumption reporting for the designated establishments, which was something that the DOE has to do. Again, I'm not going to spend any time on the recommended interventions in Vietnam, but fundamentally, you have to really, it's going to be a long haul in Vietnam, but the same three major interventions with cash incentives, cash payments on the cash incentive programs. Just a summary of what would be, what we feel would be helpful would be to create a cash rebate. I happen to think this would be beneficial in Philippines as well. Cash rebate to purchases retail products at a level that offsets the higher cost of EE appliances. As you know, many buyers look at the price and they don't really necessarily focus on energy efficiency. So if you could remove that barrier on the upfront initial price barrier, that would drive energy efficiency implementation on the product side. And then a cash payment to implementers of EE projects could be ESCOs, and this has been done with several utility programs in the US where they pay an incentive around 25% on actual M&B energy reduction. So those are the type of cash incentive programs that I think could be potentially useful in Philippines, although it wasn't highlighted so much in the report. And the same capacity building as in the other parts. So that's it in a nutshell. Sorry if it took a little bit longer than intended, but trying to.
That's okay. Thank you, Tom.
Report. Yep.
Thank you very much. And no, we appreciate your insights. And as you can probably tell, Tom knows a lot about this subject, and there's a huge amount of detail there. We will try to make all these slides available to you afterwards, so you can see some of the writing on the screen was quite small, Tom. So we'll try to make sure that people have a chance to see and understand all of the things that Tom's talking about. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights, Tom. And please stay around if we have time for some discussion and questions from all of you about the sorts of things that Tom's recommending. And you can see, isn't it amazing that we have technology that allows people to zoom in from all over the world, but it doesn't always work perfectly. This is a problem, I think, with the internet connection that we have in the hotel. Maybe too many people sending Instagram photos of the lobby. I don't know. But I think we got through the message. We can also make sure that you have this video. Such a lot of information in there. Skills, technologies, policy, support, all things that we need to think about today in terms of moving forward and unlocking the opportunities in energy efficiency financing. So I'm aware you have a lot of information already in your head, and there's probably a lot of questions that you have. What is this all about? And, you know, things that you want to know more about. But let's go through it a little bit more. We still have a few presentations to give you from different experts in the Philippines, looking at this issue from different sides. So I'm pleased to introduce to you Mr. Raymond Marquez. Raymond is also joining online. We still don't have anybody on the podium, but we will. It's coming. Raymond is the Managing Director for Econoserve and has been very much involved in implementing projects in the Philippines, looking at energy efficiency upgrades. Raymond, it's good to see you. I hope you can hear us fine. Please go ahead,
Yes.
take 5 or 10 minutes to explain what you've been doing and some of your perspective on these issues related to financing energy efficiency projects in the Philippines. Please go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you
Okay.
perfectly. Thank you.
So I'll share my screen. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think you can see my screen, right?
Yes, please go
Okay.
ahead.
So I'll be talking briefly about opportunities and financing needs and challenges in the industry, and as well as from a MSME perspective, ESCO perspective. Okay. Okay, briefly, so you would understand my background. Well, Econoserve started in June 2015, and it's an energy service company. Often we heard earlier about ESCO. So what does ESCO mean? And I will briefly tell you what it can do. So it develops, installs, and finances projects designed to improve the energy efficiency and maintenance costs for facilities over a period of time. So that's the spectrum of ESCOM. And they provide solutions. In our case, we do use, high efficiency lighting, high efficiency HVAC, motors, variable speed drives, BMS, etc. Okay. We're also accredited and certified by DOE and a founding member of the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. So I'll just skip the others. Okay, the ESCO, we look for savings, and this savings normally comes from the energy cost and the maintenance cost of a facility. And the same savings will pay for the improvements or the CAPEX as well as the ESCO. So that's the concept of an ESCO. Okay. So efficiency as a service is a pay for performance of balance sheet, meaning if there's no savings, we don't get paid. And it's off balance sheet because it's the ESCO will finance or arrange financing for the project. So it's outsourcing, essentially, the performance based. Okay, so these are the two schemes being followed in the Philippines as well as in the world. The shared savings model and the guaranteed savings model. On the shared savings model, it's the ESCO will arrange financing with its banks or FIs and guarantee performance to the client. So the big difference between the guaranteed savings model and the shared savings model is that for the guaranteed savings model, it's the client who will fund the project or get its financing from the bank, while the ESCO guarantees the performance. Okay, some opportunities. This was shared by Alex from an ADB-funded study of GFI in August of 2020. And you see the potential for about 41 billion peso of investment for the industry. Not includes the commercial sector. Okay, so you have wholesale and retail trade, accommodation, food, manufacturing, healthcare, and agriculture. Okay, then in the same report, it mentions about technologies like chillers, motors, air conditioning units, and as well as the private SME energy efficiency potential, as well as the private middle market energy efficiency potential, and the SME middle market. Okay. Okay. I want to explain to you briefly the process of or methodology of an ESCO. Starts with an end user engagement, the first talk, which the ESCO will present the concept, then a preliminary assessment, which is a walkthrough audit. Normally, it's free of charge, no? And then after that, we offer a MOA for a detailed energy audit or an investment grade audit, wherein we get the commitment of the client. Then after which, there'll be 4 weeks of on-site data gathering and processing or analysis to come up with that investment grade audit or a level 2 energy audit. Then we submit it to the client, present the results of the energy audit. And if they're still interested, then we prepare and negotiate and sign an energy efficiency performance contract. Okay, then there goes the implementation, which takes about like 10 to 12 months, especially if it's a change of chillers and the likes. And then the last one is the operation, maintenance, and verification. Measurement and verification. So that's the entire process. It takes about like a year to do this from one step to another, to the last steps. But in my experience, it takes 3 years to from the first meeting, engagement, up to the O&M. Okay, this is my last slide, and I want to dwell much on this. So if you notice, I presented the process steps here, and I want to point by point show what are the challenges of an ESCO, of an MSME ESCO. For example, for this year, most of our clients, whether industry or commercial, are focused on the requirement of an energy audit by end of December. So having said that, they're more focused on it. So all opportunities will be shelved for again after 2022. And of course, they want to see the next steps like the EUIs, Energy Utilization Index, that will be, I guess, prescribed in the next few years for their kind of industry. Okay, and there's this challenges still. The pandemic recovery versus energy savings. Of course, they were able to save because of the pandemic, but will they ramp up and focus on the recovery versus cutting out energy? And of course, there's still this challenge of it's a BOT shared savings. Is that for some it's too good to be true? But yes, there's a lot of examples already, case studies in the Philippines that says that it's not. It's real. Then you have this energy. Right now, we are experiencing, even with the level 1 energy audits, we're experiencing delays in budget allocation, bidding approvals for a simple like about 200,000-300,000 worth of energy audits. And of course, you have NDA approvals for similar industries who are very sensitive. Then you have these challenges on site, like available as-built plans, and we came to learn that, well, from my experience, most of them have no updated as-built plans, so that's a challenge for ESCOs. Now for the MOA, this one normally it stalls the client. Once we present the MOA and there's a minimal fee for the level 2 or the IGA audit, then it stops there because there's no budget and it's not a priority. So that's a challenge for ESCOs. Now from the ESCO perspective, the working capital for a free level 2 EAs or IGA. If you talk about, let's say, for next year, if we do the level 1 audits for, let's say, 30 buildings now or 30 facilities, that means like we need at least 30 million worth of funds to support the free level 2, if there's free level 2 for next year or the next year after. And then level 2 energy audit or IGA is the technology here to support the vendors. No, sometimes that's an issue. And also, of course, this one, the payback issues is less than 3 years, especially for a semicon company. They look for less than 3 years, so that's a potential or opportunity for ESCO for beyond 3 years. But the challenge again is, will they sign a long-term, like more than 5-year contract, given that the the volatility of their industry, like the semicon industry. Okay. Then here I mentioned about RES low rates. RES means the retail electricity supplier, wherein if you're now voluntary, if you're 500 kilowatt and above, you can buy from anyone else. Why low rates? Sometimes from previous rates wherein they're not taking RES yet, they are now receiving like 1, sometimes 3 peso discount. So that means from a previous payback of, let's say, 3 years, it could go as high as 4 or 5 or more than that if an ESCO will do it, given that they are getting RES from a supplier. Okay, and lastly, EEPC. EEPC means Energy Efficiency Performance Contracting. Will they do outsource it or in-house? No, so that's still a challenge. Whether they use the internal funds versus a BOT. So it's a challenge from a client's perspective. No? Now, from an ESCO perspective, here is I want to point this out. No, still, if you go to a bank, he'll ask for a collateral if you're borrowing funds, even if you're at ESCO. But I guess we would like to push for a project finance thing. No. Meaning that the savings will pay for the investment and not look at the assets of the ESCO. Okay. Of course, lastly, the ESCO 3-year waiting for decision. Like now, 2022 is for the first energy audit. Then here comes 2025. So they have a 3-year window, and they can dribble it and just wait for the next round of energy audits. Okay. I think that's my last slide. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ray. That's really a fabulous setting out of issues. And I think it's important to just check in here with the audience, because what a lot of information. I realize we need a guide to the acronyms of energy efficiency really badly, because there's so many different letters up on the screen. Can I just quickly ask for a show of hands? Who is familiar with this ESCO model? Not so many of you. I'm really pleased, Ray, that you put up that picture, which is talking about the model of energy service companies, because sometimes when I looked at that, I thought it should be simple. All of this, we're talking about assets that when you install them are going to save energy. This is going to save money. There's a repayment stream. We can finance that, right? So let's go ahead and finance that. And then it becomes so complicated. How do we know that the savings will be achieved? How can we know which technology to use? How will we establish what the measures are that need to be done? How will we get recourse to this? How will we carve out this savings stream and then somehow be able to lend against that stream? Is that an appropriate security, or is that not going to be enough to satisfy our bank's requirements? Right? It's obvious this could be done. There's a profitable income stream from this asset, but how do we capture that? And how do we create the right situation around that to enable acceleration of lending? And that's the question today, right? I mean, I think Ray went back to some of the basics of that model, where the energy services company can share the savings. They can install the equipment, they can be paid, they can make money, make a profit. There's a savings stream which can repay the loan. Everyone's happy, but it's more complicated than that. And that's what we have to get to the bottom of today. So let's hear now from another important sector, what's really happening in the country, that sector being the building sector. A lot of what we talk about in energy efficiency happens in buildings. So we're talking about lights and heating and cooling in the Philippines mostly, and other plant drives, other things that buildings use, lifts, elevators. A lot of the energy efficiency opportunities can happen in buildings. So we're going to hear from Mr. Mike Macusao. He's the president of Philenergy at Ayala Land. So probably knows one or two things about building development in the country. So Mike, if you'd like to come forward. I will just remind that we have a couple of other very important people in the panel. So I will have to keep your time just to 10 minutes. So we'll keep on track that way. Thanks very much. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. So my purpose right now is to really simplify para sa bankers perspective, no. Thank you, Bankers Association, DOE, UNOPS, Energy Transition. So I'm Mike Macusao. I'm the Chief Engineer for Operation of Ayala Land. So my role is Chief Operating Officer for Ayala Property. So Ayala Property is the property management arm of Ayala Land. We operate building, estate, and residential. I'm also the engineering director and engineering head for Ayala Malls, 32 malls across the country. I'm also as mentioned by Mark, I'm also the president for the DCS company of Ayala Land, which is the Philenergy. So basically engineering. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Technical glitch for a technical presentation.
Please go ahead and continue your presentation. The slides are taking some time to catch up.
Okay. Next slide, please. So this is basically our portfolio. So residential properties, malls, office buildings, hotels, logistics, cold storage, warehouse, and district cooling plant. So how big is our present portfolio in terms of the topic, the energy efficiency? So we are currently across 387 sites in the Philippines, 91 office buildings, 32 malls. So we actually had 210 megawatt in terms of peak. How big is that? So that is basically 12% of Metro Manila requirements. So we have around 677 generators and 612 megawatt. What is important to the bank is we consume 6.5 billion pesos of energy every year. So I think that's a more important number to the banks right now. Next slide, please. So we see challenges in terms of opportunities. So since we are so big in terms of portfolio, we need to manage that 6.5 billion consumption every year, especially we're in the middle of financial crisis. This is how we operate even before the new law. So the Asia standard is actually the first orange, no? And the global standard established by the US is actually at the last orange. So they actually both reduce it because of the energy efficiency, because of the new technology. But happy to share that Ayala is actually operating in green. So we are far better than the set standard in Asia. But there are still opportunities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Please go ahead and continue your talking presentation. I think it's the animations in the slides.
Okay. Sorry, Mark. So what is important is that the solution for energy efficiency is not just engineering. The solution is really engineering and the right level of financing. Again, as a bank, I also came from Citibank and JP Morgan before joining back Ayala. So why do we spend on energy efficiency programs? because of the savings. So where are those savings can be coming from? Next slide, please. So this is a big challenge. Philippines is one of the most expensive. Obviously, DOE will not say that perspective because DOE will say because of the taxes. But reality check that Philippines power rate is far higher than world average. It's actually far higher than Asia average. So this is an opportunity. We are a tropical country. We pay higher power rate. So therefore, there is an opportunity in terms of investment because of the potential savings. Next slide, please. Another challenge and opportunity is the maturity of construction industry in the Philippines. When you construct a building, the normal discussion from the owner, okay, this is not Ayala, this is actually the general majority of the Philippines. The first question is, how much is the budget? In fact, the budget relates to the capital expense only, not on the life cycle approach. So that's the reason why designer, contractor will always offer the cheapest equipment. Say in terms of chiller, centrifugal chillers, why not use the magnetic levitation or the inverter type? Because they are more expensive. But remember, you will construct 5 years, but you will operate 50 years. Or you will operate at least 20 years in terms of economic life of the equipment. Those are not being considered. In addition, 50 to 60% of our monthly energy bill is actually related to air conditioning. So the big ticket is really the HVAC. So for tropical countries. So majority of the buildings in the Philippines is actually at 0.9, 0.95 or 1.0 kilowatt per ton. But ASRE, or the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineer, is saying we should be at 0.7. 0.7 means we're drawing 0.7 kilowatt and we are providing 1 tons of cooling. So the higher the number, the less efficient. So there is really a big opportunity. Next slide, please. AI, BMS, plant manager. So we keep on using those words. But again, in the reality in the Philippines, you go across the different buildings in the Philippines, 80% of our building, the BMS is just monitoring, except for those buildings that applies for LEED certification. So therefore, we are not actually using AI properly. Because of the present infrastructure in the Philippines, especially for existing building. How can you chip the marble? How can you embed wire right now for the existing building? And in terms of internet, there are still a lot of dead spot within the building. So there are so many partners across the different globe that are offering to Ayala, BMS, AI. But when we tell them, okay, you inspect the site, they cannot really make the payback properly because of the hardware that they need to install. Again, those are reality. Next slide, please. Focus on the big tickets. Yes, we keep on hearing LED lamps, high efficiency technologies in terms of the different technology. But again, the real ticket is the HVAC, 54%. So if we can reduce the demand, not just on the kilowatt, but if we can reduce the demand, we can also reduce our monthly electricity bill. So the real ticket is really the air conditioning. I'm not saying we will not focus on others, but the real investment that will provide you faster payback is really the air conditioning. Next slide, please. BPO. BPO is the second, okay, revenue generating for the government after the overseas Filipino worker. And BPO, there's a lot of opportunity because they operate at non-peak. They operate mostly at night. So therefore, there is no sun. So if we can only automate properly our system, our air conditioning, so we can save a lot rather than allowing them to freeze at night. So that's the reason why, again, I keep on saying air conditioning because those are the real tickets. Next slide, please. What I'm trying to say here in front of you is that, yes, there are challenges provided by ESCO. Yes, there are challenges in terms of rolling out energy efficiency, but there are opportunities. There are real opportunities on the ground right now. Other challenges is again, aside from the policy, aside from the law, is really protection from the government against fly-by-night companies. Because fly-by-night, if they don't have proper screening locally, they can really screw up energy efficiency. Because ESCO or energy efficiency financing is really a long-term, gain. That's the reason why the biggest challenge the Philippines is really the understanding and maturity of ESCO. So that's very important. Next slide, please. So what we are actually working with the government is really a protection against fly-by-night company. Then the required minimum financing. You go to the World Bank, you go to the different banks. So they actually often provide the traditional financing scheme, which is not aligned to the ESCO scheme because the ESCO is actually upfront financing. Say we awarded our latest ESCO 5 plants worth 1 billion contract. So the ESCO actually upfront, did the investment on the first 3 years, then the gain will happen actually 4th year up to 15 years because their target is to reduce the 1.0 kilowatt per TR to 0.7. So basically to immediately gain the 30% efficiency. That's the ESCO model. No? Next slide, please.
Mike, if I can ask you to wrap up in the next 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah?
So I already mentioned the required minimum financing and probably a summary of the risk and long-term financing. So si Mark naman will share all the slides of that we prepared. But fundamentally, Mark, what we are saying is that, let me summarize now. Government already established and enacted laws, policies, and legal framework. However, ESCO understanding and maturity in the country is what we really need to push for so that banks can understand how really ESCO can operate. Traditional financing is not aligned to the ESCO business model. We all know in the Philippines, year-on-year growth are really good, but directly proportional to the energy use and demand. That's the reason why every summer, we still experience power interruption. That's the reason why we joined the government ILP, wherein we voluntarily shut down our utilities and use our generator so that we can help the government while the government is actually building the plants. And lastly, EE rollout is a factor of so many variants: policy, regulation, engineering, financing, and successful execution. As the ESCO company is mentioning, it took them 3 years to execute an ESCO contract because the Philippines is not yet mature. Because the Philippines, is not fully, do not fully understood how ESCO works. But ESCO is really a good business model, especially right now that cash is king, CapEx is really very important. So we'll be happy to share and connect with you in case you need anything about Ayala operation. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mike Macbusau. Obviously, a lot of lessons to share there about the real life experience of doing this and understanding, what is happening in the market. Thanks very much, and we will indeed share the materials that Mike has with the audience after the session. So now we're also moving to hear a banking perspective, and I'm really pleased that we have Director Cruz here, Plastico Noli Cruz. He's going to present to us from the Development Bank of the Philippines. An in-person presenter also, which is fabulous. Please come forward. I think we'll be sharing your slides for you, so they should hopefully work from a little bit closer to home. I'm not sure, but apologies for it's the speed of the internet in the hotel that's struggling to work with the slides presentation. But please go ahead. We're great to hear from you from the perspective of DBP on this question of energy efficiency financing, and you have about 10 minutes to share your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and please allow me to remove my mask in my presentation. It's a bit difficult to breathe while talking. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to share with you our financing. I think the DBP experience is not that really more on the energy efficiency like the Ayala group. What I'm trying to drive at is the energy efficiency savings financing program is somehow would be able to help out in terms of financing as a model. So next slide, please. Most of us here in the bank is really looking for opportunity, and the presenters a while ago already provided some of the opportunities as mentioned by Mike of APMC, and also with Raymond, and some of the challenges. What I would like to share with you here is basically macro perspective of banks insofar as the international market as well as on the local market. We have here the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and it talks about particularly SDG 13 on the climate action, and energy efficiency projects contribute to that climate change mitigation as it reduces energy consumption that are produced by fossil fuel-based power generation plants. Also, along this UN SDG is the Paris Climate Agreement. So most of the countries already committed, and a while ago there's also a presentation about the Philippines committing to 75% emission and avoidance by 2030. And of course, this is defined in the nationally determined contribution set by our Philippine government. So next slide, please. So this is an opportunity. What I'm trying to drive at here is what does this mean? Is that we have a changing market preference globally, and thus energy efficiency is indeed the way to go to contribute to this goal. So this is local. There are two laws. I included EVIDA, or the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act, where I think the 11285, or the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, also talks about alternative fuels. And thus, electric vehicle will also help out in terms of fuel consumption. So these are the two laws that will drive the demand and investment in energy efficiency. So we have the Republic Act 11285, or the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, and Republic Act 11697, or the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act. This is a recently enacted law. And of course, on the right side, maybe some of you are already familiar about the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas issued circular number 1085, or the Sustainable Finance Framework, which mandates all BSP supervised financial institutions to embed sustainability principles, including those covering environmental and social risk areas, in their corporate governance framework, risk management systems, strategic objectives and overall bank's operation. So what does it mean? This really creates the demand and also requires or mandate us to look into putting investment as a bank more on those that will tackle environment and social safeguards. And energy efficiency, as mentioned again, is again one of the climate action that we could contribute to in terms of financing, aside from renewable energy. Of course, there are challenges, no? So next slide, please. So again, a macro perspective, no? So most of the businesses were affected in the 2-year problem that we had for COVID-19. And some of them are still recovering, no, as we speak. A while ago, the demand shown by Raymond Marquez, as shared by Alex Ablasa in terms of the estimation, it talks about wholesale and some hotels, and that would really drive the demand. But they are also the most hit industry insofar as COVID-19. So that's really the concern insofar as the bank, no, in doing more of energy efficiency projects. Also, the Ukraine-Russia war, where there is a supply disruption, and some of the logistics businesses were also affected. And in fact, that is causing our inflation to increase, and come with the inflation is the increasing interest rate. So next slide, please. So anyway, because of that, there's an issue, no, of bankability of the project proponents. As mentioned, some of them are still recovering. Maybe some of them experienced losses. And normally banks requires at least 3 years, no, profitable business. And given that they're still recovering, there's a need, no, and perhaps the guarantee being proposed to loans would be able to help as credit enhancer. So that's one area perhaps that where some donor agency or philanthropy donors, no, could be able to help out to propel the engine in terms of investment to energy efficiency projects. Also, some of the ESCOs, no, have limited capital, and they are not able to grow as much, no, because it would require also their, to increase their capital. I think Raymond Marquez also mentioned that in this presentation, the need for equity infusion. For the government procurement, this is also an issue because they cannot do an ESCO model type, no, because of the performance constructing services. Any savings goes back to the National Treasury. It's not something that they could make use of to pay off the contract. But again, there are models, no, where LGUs doing a build list transfer type arrangement to private entity by, for example, for changing the lighting system, no, the street lights in particular, and they have a contract based on the savings. So those are the innovations being done in the market right now, especially for public entities. Another is on electric vehicles. No, I don't know. Most of you have cars here, and the good thing about rising fuel costs is we're now looking at hybrid system as well as electric vehicles. But should fuel come down to, let's say, a 30 or 40, perhaps the electric vehicle would have a different look. No? So this is an opportunity, no? And then, of course, market acceptance problem, maybe it already changed now. Proven technology, some of the LGUs that are in the, let's say, higher elevation have problems on using electric vehicles. I'm talking about this on other programs that we have, particularly on PUB modernization, because even if we have promoted the use of electric vehicle on some of the transport system, they are a bit skeptic insofar as being able to address the needs of their riders or the ridership. So the cost of vehicle. If we're talking about electric vehicles, no, it's about twice as much. But for PUBMP, I think it's higher, no, insofar as the cost of the regular engine or fuel-based vehicle. So for availability of charging station, perhaps in the next year or 2 years from now, we're gonna see a lot of investment given the law or the EVIDA law. So that's one opportunity where the banks could really come in and help out in the electric vehicle industry. Lack of absence, local public transport route plan. I think the LTFRB already opened up the PUB modernization to all banks, and there is a guarantee for you. So I think the only issue here is about the availability of the local public transport route plan. So what does it mean? No? The local public transport route plan defines how many units should fly certain routes. And they also provide the visibility of flying the route. So that's the importance. No? Okay. And okay, next slide, please. So I'd like to share with you the E2Save, the energy efficiency savings financing program. This is savings, payment based on savings. No, we promote this program as payment based on savings. As Raymond said, it's too good to be true. No, but I think some of our installation, these are more of the solar rooftop installation. It's really paying off its obligation based on the savings. It's true also that they were affected by the RES or the retail electricity supply because I think it was lower to 750 kilowatt, and therefore they could already do a direct access. What does it mean is they could bypass already the distribution cost, and therefore it would have a savings. No, before the computation is straightforward: transmission, distribution, generation cost, all in, and then they will provide certain discount, and that's it. But now you have to factor in the retail electricity supplier on the direct connect. So for E2Save, we basically finance all energy efficiency projects, which later on will also include the green building as well as electric vehicle. For now, it's not yet designed that way because we just focus on energy efficiency savings. This caters to public sector as well as private companies, the energy service providers, as well as the energy service companies, just like with Raymond Marquez. So the tenor that we provide here is up to 10 years, inclusive of 1 year grace period based on cash flow. We believe that the tenor of the loan that we are offering is generous enough because a good energy efficiency project could pay up, perhaps 5 to 7 years. So 10 years is already generous. Of course, it's different if we're talking about green building projects, and that would require a long-term financing of up to 15 years. So interest rate, well, we allow here 100% financing for public institution just to encourage them to invest on energy efficiency projects. And for ESCO or ESPs, we provide up to 80%. Again, the standard for banks is usually up to 70% only. We up it to another 10% just to encourage investment on energy efficiency. The distinct features here is we provide also omnibus term loan facility for ESCO and ESPs for their pipeline of projects. So if they have 2-year pipeline projects, we could already cover that under this omnibus term loan facility, where each project would enjoy a 10-year tenor, and therefore it would be easier for them to access finance. Again, here we promote or allow loan repayment based on savings. for the 10-year period, we could have an 80-20, based on savings sharing, meaning to say if the savings about 1 million, we could dedicate 800,000 as for loan repayment. Okay, so in summary, next slide, please. I would like to say that I think I share with the earlier presentation that the China's success, among others, is enforcement. I heard in one of the forum that enforcement on the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act will come by 2024. I also attended the Energy Management Association of the Philippines, or the ENMAP, and they're really gearing towards preparing for the requirement or the compliances of the different buildings. And therefore, it really creates an opportunity for most banks in catering to CAPEX requirements of the different buildings. A while ago, there was a presentation by Mike showing their companies, the opportunity on their company, but how many more buildings we have in the city or highly urbanized cities. No? So those are opportunities that we could look into aside from the electric vehicle opportunity as well. So there are three. No, one is again, I'd like to highlight. One is the Energy Efficiency Conservation Act, which will enforce by 2024 the regulation. So there are designated entity that would be required to reduce its consumption, electricity consumption, and therefore there would be penalties to be slapped to these building owners if they are not able to comply. Second is the electric vehicle, EVIDA, also an opportunity for CAPEX because charging station will have to be seen in some of the malls and the areas. No? And third, our compliances, including DBP, on the Sustainable Finance Framework by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So all these things come together as an opportunity for us to, one, comply and also increase our loan portfolio. So good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much, Vice President Cruz. And it's coming out loud and clear now from your talk and also from that came before. There's a lot of opportunity. We have supportive regulation. We're starting to see opportunities, in the wider world. Also, the point was made about energy prices and pressure on energy. So energy security becomes a bigger imperative as well. So a lot of opportunities coming up if the conditions are right. I don't want to cut anybody off. We all have so many important, interesting things to share, but we are running a bit over time, as you've seen. So we're having a morning break, merienda, at the table. We're going to keep going. Please make yourself comfortable, get some snacks, and enjoy that. If you need to take a break, restroom break, whatever, that's fine. But we're going to continue going rather than breaking officially. So that we can make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. And we'll continue from that into our session, which is scheduled for after the break, on some of the solutions. Filipinas. Assistant Governor Lynn Javier, and she's going to share a little bit with us on the banking sector regulatory, the supportive banking sector regulation, which is important for this, as well as any perspectives on this question of energy efficiency financing. So please, Ms. Javier, you're most welcome.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting the Bangko Sentral to be part of this consultation workshop. So could you post my slide, please? And for this morning, I'll be covering 4 key areas. I'll share the approach of the Bangko Sentral in mainstreaming the sustainable finance framework. And thank you very much for mentioning circular number 1085. I'll go over the credit risk management expectation and see how ESG credit-related risk fit into this earlier issued circular of the BSP. I'll cover prudential treatment on credit risk exposures and with initiatives that we should all collaborate on, and the existing initiatives of the Bangko Sentral. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, now the BSP recognizes that climate change and ESG related risks actually pose significant threats to, first, our financial stability, second, in achieving our financial inclusion targets. So this is really a big reason, or significant reason why the Bangko Sentral should mainstream ESG regulations in the financial industry. But while the triggers of ESG related risks may be new, the channels through which they manifest are traditional, or these are the headline risks that you all also manage: credit, operational, liquidity, and even market risk. So shaped by this approach, we recognize that the BSP already introduced specific guidelines on corporate governance and risk management. So what we did was just to embed ESG expectations on these existing regulations of the Bangko Sentral. So circular number 1085, which was introduced earlier, circular number 1128, wherein we provided guidelines in incorporating ESG-related considerations in managing credit and operational risk. And the Monetary Board just recently approved the guidelines in incorporating ESG-related principles in investment management activities of banks. So that third circular will soon be posted on our website. So these three issuances are anchored on existing regulations of the Bangko Sentral. They're all built on three key features of our regulatory framework. First, we've set out responsibilities or accountabilities of the board of directors, senior management, and the control functions. If you'll see all our reports of examination, I mean, the banking industry are quite familiar with that. Enforcement actions or enforcement sanctions are all anchored on the three lines of defense of the IIA. So we talk about the responsibilities of the first, second, third line of defense, as well as the oversight function of the board of directors. Second, we provided the risk management expectations of the Bangko Sentral, from identifying risk to managing the risk, using tools as well to measure and manage the risk. Third, we emphasize this in all our issuances. The issuances of the Bangko Sentral are governed by the overarching principle of proportionality. You've heard this over and over again. That is, there's no one size fits all framework for banks. So it would depend on your size, risk exposures, risk appetite, and your complexity of operations. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we built on existing credit risk management expectations of the Bangko Sentral when we introduced the guidelines under circular number 1128. So we anchored our expectations on the provisions of that circular, wherein the board should approve the credit risk strategy and credit policies of bank. Second, the credit strategy should reflect profit expectations, growth targets, capability of the bank to manage risk. So you cannot set very high loan targets if you cannot manage the risk attendant to such exposure. And third, the alignment of these targets with your corporate objectives and strategy. So this the credit risk management system earlier issued by the Bangko Sentral expects bank to identify their target markets, the segments, and the industry they would want to have exposure to, as well as the portfolio mix that you want to have. Next slide, please. So circular number 28 covered those three areas I've mentioned. So the ESG objectives and lending should be incorporated in your credit strategy. We specifically articulated that banks should have short, medium-term, and long-term objectives in terms of aligning with the ESG goals of the institution. The circular also provides that you may progressively increase your exposure to sustainability-related projects. So we do not expect things or change to happen overnight. We do not expect that by tomorrow you'd have 100% sustainable loan portfolio. But do we expect that you progressively increase your targets as you also align with the ESG objectives? Third, we do understand that banks may at certain point lend to high ESG sectors. But before you extend that loan, you have to have strict criteria, assessment on this exposure, as well as this should be supported as well on why you would still want to extend to high ESG risk sectors. And those areas or decisions also would be, again, when the examination team visits the bank, that would be also one of the discussion points that we will have during our examination. And we also expect banks that in their underwriting, you would already incorporate ESG factors in terms of assessing the capacity of the borrower to pay their obligation. Next slide, please. For this morning, I'll talk about the limits, the capital treatment, as well as potential reduction in capital treatment of this exposure. So for limits, in previous dialogues and workshop, they talked about the SBL. It's quite restricting. Unfortunately, SBL is embedded in the general banking law. So it's set at 25%, but we do recognize risk mitigating or guarantees for the SBL, say holdouts, or if they're guaranteed by a security by the government. So that will be deducted from the SBL. But we do have, this was mentioned earlier, project finance, special treatment for project finance loans. Now, lending to project finance activities or projects is not separated from the SBL of a particular borrower. Say a borrower A has already existing loan in a bank, and then the borrower also engages in project finance. The project finance exposure would be carved out for purposes of determining compliance with the SBL. Second, if you're lending to a DOSRI or director, officer, stockholder related interest of the bank, project finance exposures are also excluded for purposes of determining compliance with the 30% unsecured ceiling for DOSRI. And third, project finance is also excluded for purposes of determining the large exposure threshold. Incidentally, the Monetary Board recently approved the 25% large exposure monitoring threshold, and we do recognize the concern of the industry in terms of this may have unintended consequences of constraining or limiting lending to, say, the power sector or EE projects. But due to our also dialogue with the industry, we have excluded for purposes of determining the threshold, loans to energy projects, sustainable finance-related projects, and project finance investments. So these are all excluded. Lending to public infra is also excluded for purposes of determining compliance with the 25% large exposure monitoring threshold. Existing regulations also consider already eligible guarantees to mitigate credit risk. So it's already in place. We just have to see those guarantees kicking in to have a reduced risk weight for these exposures. And finally, I think this is the most exciting part of my presentation. The recent amendments to the Agri-Agra law, which lapsed into law last July 28, recognizes lending to ESG projects or activities as eligible mode of compliance for the 25% mandatory credit allocation for Agri-Agra. We have yet to issue the circular, but we're bound by a specific timeline, and we'll be working with the industry on that. So this is one piece of good news, because the law also lifted the 10 and 15 requirements for Agra and Agri exposure. So we do hope that with these amendments to the mandated credit allocation to Agri-Agra, this would incentivize banks to lend to energy efficiency projects or sustainable related projects. I'm checking on the time. So next slide, please. The BSP recognizes that we actually subscribe to the idea that if banks understand the risk, they'll be able to better manage the risk, and they'll also see the opportunities in terms of lending to sustainability-related projects or activities. So this consultation workshop would actually unlock financing to EE projects as banks gain further understanding on how to assess the cash flows, how to underwrite these exposures, how to assess the risk and properly price the lending. The BSP actually encourages cash flow based lending. So again, the question after understanding this risk is that what documentation would support now lending to EE to ensure that we also, as supervisors, understand the risk exposures that you're also getting into the bank. So let me end with other initiatives of the Bangko Sentral in promoting sustainable finance. We are working with the WWF Philippines and the World Bank in terms of conducting vulnerability assessment exercises with the standalone thrift and rural banks. The World Bank with the stress testing exercises through the BAP as well of the bigger commercial banks. And we do hope that with these projects or initiatives, this would feed into the development policies on vulnerability assessment and stress testing. We have also issued the stress testing baka pag-issued, matense tayong lahat. We have exposed for comments the stress testing guidelines, but again, we wanted to work with the industry on this one because we wanted to have also a pragmatic approach. We understand that stress testing, it's very stressful to do because also of the scenarios that we have to put in place to ensure that they are reflective of domestic conditions. And finally, the BSP along with the financial sector supervisors, the SEC, the IC, and the PDIC, we are already working on the taxonomy following the guiding principles issued by the Green Force under the support of the British Embassy Manila, and also drawing from the ASEAN taxonomy version 1. So we do hope that they'll be able to provide the taxonomy soon enough, also to encourage investment to sustainable activities and projects. So I'll pause here. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Assistant Governor Javier. Some important messages there, I'm sure, very interesting for all of you to hear about the supportive environment that's being built, even around regulation of the banking sector. So very exciting news. And we've heard quite a lot about opportunities that are out there. So I guess the question now, as we move into our next session, through the break to the material that follows, we've been talking all about the Philippines. And we've been talking about what's happening here from different perspectives, from end users like the building sector or in industry, what are the issues being faced? The government, which we've had the message about supportive policy being in place and continuing to be implemented, and the banking sector as well. So it seems like all of the pieces are in place. The question is then for all of you, what is it that you need? What is it that you would like to know? What is it that you will need to know so you can start to move forward internally in your own organizations? So maybe there's questions in your mind about that. Maybe there's a lot of information that's been shared so far, which is you're not clear on everything that you've heard. This is a short chance before we launch into the next stage, which is thinking about where are some models that have really worked to unlock financing from overseas? What are the sorts of tools and mechanisms that we could think about in the Philippines and could think about promoting in the Philippines? That's what we're going to talk about next, but we need to just pause for a minute to give you a chance while you're eating, drinking, thinking, if you have any questions to any of the speakers that you've heard today. So I'm opening the floor to any of you if you have any questions. We just have a few minutes before we go into the next session. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask to any of the speakers, or just make a general comment either? Yes, we'll need to use the microphone because that will be, otherwise the online people can't hear us. And also, please just tell us your name and where you're from. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sel Nyola from PNB. I have a question for Ms. Lynn Javier. Ma'am, you mentioned that it will be excluded from the 25% real estate limit energy for the projects that's engaged in energy efficiency or infrastructure projects for public use. I'm just wondering, how will it have an impact on the expanded real estate exposure? Will it also be excluded from EREE or just from the real estate unit?
When we issued the circular, the idea is to promote financing and investments to public infra. So while the BSP is looking at excluded it from the real estate limit. The real, you're talking about the rest. It's actually a soft limit. And then the idea is for banks to show how you manage the risk arising from these exposures. So while you may breach that limit for arrest, there's no sanction or enforcement action. We just want discussions, or we wanted to see how you manage these exposures. That's why the amendments also include incorporating this stress testing exercises in the ICA app, instead of us writing the bank every quarter on this one. That's a limit that we also monitor, but it's a soft limit.
Okay, thank you. I have a question over here from our host today, from Serpa, from ETP.
Yeah, also for you, ma'am. Couple of questions. So very curious about this new circular that you are preparing. I wonder if you would talk a little bit more about it, like what kinds of provisions will it provide for bankers? What kinds of exceptions? And also whether you have been modeling to what extent it would now support the market unleashing its potential. And another question on the stress testing, to what extent you are seeing that will actually be relevant and support? I mean, stress testing in terms of banking sector vulnerabilities, I guess I will touch on the conventional fronts of profitability of the banks, and but in particular regarding energy efficiency investment, how are you seeing that these stress testing and vulnerability assessments actually will promote energy efficiency investments? Thank you.
Those are tough questions. You're pertaining to the circular on incorporating ESG risks in the investment management activities of bank that will soon be posted on the web. This will only cover the banking book exposures. So this excludes the trading portfolio, because we also wanted to again adopt a pragmatic approach. It's quite difficult to do the underwriting criteria if shares or investments are being traded. That circular incorporates some suggestions on how you would underwrite or select in bonds or equities that you would want to invest into. So the expectations in that circular are somehow aligned with the provisions of circular number 1128. But the emphasis now is on the banking book. So we're talking about the FVOCI and the HTC investments, explicitly excluding the trading portfolio. Again, setting out the requirements from the board of directors, and then aligning with the strategic objectives of the bank in line with the ESG principles. For the stress testing, we wanted to measure the potential impact of climate-related risks on the bank's books. In the last financial sector assessment program mission conducted by the jointly conducted by the IMF and the World Bank, and the paper is actually published, they looked at the impact of physical risks and did some stress testing exercises as well, using the existing financial statements of banks. What we're working on now with the World Bank is on stress testing the transition risks. So what do we want to achieve after this one? Apart from feeding whatever insights we learned into our policy development process, we wanted to see how this risk would actually manifest in the books or the Philippine banking system. So we're looking at the short, medium, and long-term horizon. Again, would this result in increased capital, say, for brown and green assets? Not yet, and probably not until we have the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision has adopted also the capital risk weights for this one. There's actually an interesting paper issued by the IIF saying that it might not be time yet to adopt risk weight for brown assets, because some studies show, and it's the differentiation between green and brown, we have yet to strengthen the assessment on that one. But while we're not adopting it for Pillar 1, that's the risk weight, we're adopting it for Pillar 2, and the BSP has been very vocal about this, that we would be assessing how you manage ESG related risk and how you incorporate that in your capital planning process. So the BSP's approach is for Pillar 2. So we do hope that with that stress testing initiative as well, that would inform also our Pillar 2 assessment.
Great. Thank you for that detailed answer. And thank you for all that BSP is doing to support sustainable finance in the country. Of course, I'm the MC, so I have to keep time of the meeting. And I'm sure there's much more thoughts that you're having on how to progress this and how we take forward these ideas that we're starting to talk about. I promise there will be time in the afternoon to discuss this at length. You'll have, in fact, the afternoon is devoted to all of you as the speakers, not the speakers up here. So we will move on to our next session, but I want you to keep those thoughts in your mind of how can you actually leverage the opportunity that's there now, and what are the things that are holding you back as an institution, and maybe how could they be addressed?